Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 174 of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is Bite Me, an interview with Ally Hilfiger. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
Matt, Ally Hilfiger is one of the most accomplished women we've ever interviewed. In fact, she's one of the most accomplished women I've ever met. And what was most shocking about her story is that she was suffering from chronic Lyme disease since she's 7 years old, and she's been able to accomplish so much despite suffering from a chronic disease.
And Rich, what really stood out to me about this interview with Ally Hilfiger is that we often hear from our followers and listeners that if they were rich and they had resources, they'd be able to overcome chronic Lyme very quickly. And that's simply just not true. Ally Hilfiger was on the sick merry-go-round for decades, and the tools that got her into remission were not those that cost a significant amount of money.
So, Matt, this woman decided that she was going to dedicate her life and dedicate her career to helping other people. And she started by writing the book, Bite Me. And since then, she has become one of the most powerful advocates in the Lyme disease community. And we were really blessed to have this really powerful and vulnerable interview with the author of Bite Me, Ally Hilfiger. Hey, Ally, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me, you guys.
Well, we're really blessed to have you, Ally. We're really excited about this podcast. Our followers are really excited about this podcast. So, Ally, I want to start in a unique place with you on this podcast. And I want you to talk to us or share with us about the lowest point in your journey. Where were you?
Okay.
What was it like? What was going on when you were at your lowest point?
Whoa, I love this. This is really interesting, first of all. And thank you. I'm thrilled to be here today. So here we go. Let's think. The lowest point. I was 24, 25 years old. The lowest point, gosh, I think there have been a couple. All right. The first lowest point was when I was 18 years old, after my TV show had aired, after I couldn't decide whether or not I was going to go to school, to college after graduating, and before I ended up in a psych ward. That was probably my first lowest point in not having any control over my mind or my emotions or my body. And the most frustrating thing was not having control over my body and my mind. So, ending up and waking up in a psych ward, which is how my book starts, was probably the lowest point in my life.
So talk to us about what it was like to be brought to that psych ward by your dad and his security staff.
So, well, I was living after high school graduation and filming the show, I lived in Miami with my then boyfriend. And I was lost. I couldn't go anywhere without being recognized, which I was unprepared for and really freaked out and overwhelmed by. And I came back home around Christmas time and I was just extremely ungrounded and very ADD, all over the place, couldn't really string a sentence together very easily. I was smoking a lot of pot at the time because it was helping with physical symptoms of not being able to eat or sleep and constantly feeling nauseous. So the weed really helped. But back then it was like, anywhere you could get weed, you took it. It wasn't like now you can go to a store and be very specific about what kind of strain, etc. I think that all of my frustrations and anxieties boiled up to one peak at that point, and I needed help. I wanted help. I wanted someone to help contain me and put me back together and heal me. I wanted healing, and I didn't know where to go or how to get it. And I think I wanted structure. I wanted someone to take care of me and feed me and help me to sleep, and take the nausea away and take the joint pain away and, focus me. But I couldn't. And my poor father just had no idea what to do. And he talked to a psychiatrist, I believe, at the time, and was telling him about my behavior and just everything. And I think she was like, listen, we've got to get this this girl into a place, like a medical place where we can like start from ground zero, stabilize her, and then figure out what's going on. No, they drugged me basically. I thought I was going to Jamaica. I was like, I just need to go to Jamaica and lie on a beach and just hang out with Rastas because that's gonna help. Which maybe it would have, who knows? They probably would have given me papaya leaf tea and garlic to help, whatever. Anyway, I ended up in a psych ward with like looking down at my Adidas sneakers and the shoelaces were out. And I was like, what is going on? Where am I? I mean, I've never been like a suicidal person or, I've always been like a very good girl, pretty stable-ish. I mean, I had a lot of panic attacks in my teens, but anyway, I was just so confused. And I think being in that hospital was the lowest point in my life.
So, Ally, I'm going to ask you to now look at this from a different vantage point. I
Right.
shared with you that I'm the parent of 4 daughters, and
Right.
I read your book twice. I read your book before Matt and I started this podcast, and then I reread your book last week. And when I was reading the book, I got to the part where you were describing the steps your father had to take to have you moved from your mother's apartment to ultimately going to this hospital that you went to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading it as I was stepping into your father's shoes when I read it. And I had to put the book down because I couldn't do what your dad did. I'm not strong enough. I would not have been able to do what your dad did had this been my experience. It was so powerful for me. I had to put the book down because it was so well written and I was so emotional as I read that. So now I'm going to ask you to look at this, not from the perspective that you had written the book, which is Ally's perspective. I'm now going to ask you to look at it as if you're the parent, because you're now a mother, you have a child. If it was your child that was in the position that you were in, and you're now the parent the way your father had been, describe for us what you would do, and do you believe you could be as strong as your dad had been? Because he had to overcome your mother's objections, he had to overcome your objections, he had to overcome your mother's security objections. Would you be able to do that?
Well, I don't know, because I haven't had to do it, but I can imagine that I'm made up of a lot of the same stuff as my father. And I do have his strength, and I do have his wisdom, and I do have his heart and soul, which is very deep and very vast. And he has one of the biggest, kindest hearts of any human I've ever met. And I do believe that I would be able to muster up the strength if I was like 1000% sure that this was the solution to getting my daughter well.
But he couldn't have been 100% sure, 1000% sure, because he didn't know what was wrong with you.
He couldn't have, and I think, gosh, I cannot. It was probably one of the hardest decisions he's ever had to make, and the hardest things, and I cannot imagine. I don't know, and I might, with me crying in his arms the way I was in the moment that he was holding me and trying to get the medicine in my mouth, and having the security guard with me. I mean, I think I would have probably broke down and just been like, you know what, honey, just, I don't know if I can, let's just go to Jamaica. I don't know. I do not know. The moment of like getting me in the car, like getting the medicine in my mouth, physically holding me with the security people, my mom freaking out and screaming in the house I grew up in, getting me in the car. Well, I willingly went in the car because I thought he was bringing me to the airport. And like, I mean, I just would have been so emotional. Or as a parent, what I've noticed is when a emergency happens or like a crisis happens, I kind of go into this weird slow motion robotic mode where I'm very emotionally detached, and it's almost I sink into this like very slow motion robot where I can take care of the situation in a very methodical, practical, deliberate way. This is different. This is not like, oh my God, your kid cut her finger open and you have to do something. This is like very different, and it's very deep. And so I don't know. I really don't know. And God, it's just like breaks my heart to think that, and it's so interesting. Like a few weeks ago, I was with him and I was crying, just being like, I'm so sorry for having to put you through that. And I so badly wanted to get better in my life, in my 20s, especially because I did not want my pain to hurt you anymore. And I was so angry at myself. I was so angry with my body and with my mind. I mean, I was so angry with my body for not being able to get well and to keep having the relapses and to keep going through the struggle, because I knew how much it hurt him to see his daughter, who, you know, we have an incredibly close relationship. And so I was just like crying and like in his arms again, being like, I just was so mad at myself. And I'm so happy that I'm healthy now, and that you get to see me thriving in my life, that I get to give you that gift of me well, because it just pained me to know that I was burdening him or making him feel so sad to see his daughter unwell. I mean, that was really, that like guilt. It was like a guilt and shame that I held on to, that I walked around with, that guilt and shame, which of course ultimately doesn't get you healthy. It's a very multi-layered situation. And the long and short of it is, I hope that I would have the strength to do what he did. And I think that I would, because of my own experience. I'd say, I know this is going to help, and yeah, it's going to really suck, but I know. But I'd probably have a few moments where I'd like walk away and tell my husband, like, I can't do this.
So let's give this scene some context. Let's walk back to your early life. You're a native New Yorker, right? You're born to two artists. So talk to us about your parents and your birthplace, New York, and what your early life was like.
Well, yeah, my parents grew up in upstate New York. They were both artists, clothing designers, into music, kind of like hippies, I guess, in a way. Not like extreme, but the hearts of hippies, I guess. And they moved to New York. I was conceived in Soho, which I love, and born on the Upper West Side. And they moved to Connecticut when I was a year old. My dad had just launched Tommy Hilfiger. When I was 5, my brother was born. And then we moved to New York when he was about a year old. And they rented, I mean, he was making money at that point, which was so unusual for them, because they did not grow up with means, really. And so they rented houses in the Hamptons, in Bridgehampton. And I was bitten by a tick, and it was on my tummy.
Now, do you remember the tick bite experience? Or is this something that was relayed to you?
You know, it's sort of like the way that they're studying memory now. If you're told a story enough, you start to adapt it as your own, and you think. So I at this point, I have somehow conjured up this memory from my mother's story, that I remember being on the bed and her pulling the tick off of my belly button. Like, I can see it. I can see her, the tweezers. I can see it on my belly button because I have a little birthmark there. I can see it coming off. I kind of can like remember that memory of being on the bed. So, but is it, I don't know if that's real or not. So who knows?
Now, do you recall being concerned about ticks at that stage in your life?
No. I mean, they were just like yucky and weird, you know, they were just kind of like a bug, like yucky when you're 7 years old. But it wasn't this serious, like intense thing, like, oh my God, you got bit by a rattlesnake and you're gonna die. It wasn't anything like that. It was just like, ugh.
Now you grew up in the Lyme Belt, right? You were spending time on Long Island. You were spending time in New York City, upstate New York, and Connecticut. So you're in the Lyme Belt.
Mm-hmm.
Were you given any education or training about tick awareness, tick avoidance, tick removal?
Well, no, I was not, but my mother, since being in Connecticut, I think she had some knowledge from the town hall and the pediatrician's office. So she was wise enough, and she was educated enough at that time, which was a little rare, I think, in the 90s, in the 1990
early 90s, yeah,
my early 90s. And she took the tick off and saved it and sent it to the town hall, which was advanced for that time to do something like that. And the results came back and they were inconclusive.
So let's pause there for a minute. So we're in the early 90s. There's not a whole lot known about ticks and Lyme disease at the time. Your mom is pretty sophisticated. She removes the tick. She takes you to a doctor, which is pretty rare and sophisticated. She saves the tick and has the tick tested. So she does almost everything right. And certainly at that time, she is way ahead of her time, yet you still get sick.
Right. Yeah, I think, that she really did have to do everything right. And she even argued with the doctor, because I think she sent the tick to a second place. And the doctor was like, we're not able to really decide whether or not this tick is infected or not. And she argued with the doctor. She had like a heated discussions, being like, this is so unacceptable. What are you saying? And I think it kind of died off from there in a way.
So do you know if you were given any prophylactic treatment by the doctor that your mother brought you to when you were 7?
No, I was not.
Okay. So now let's fast forward. So these two brilliant artists who ultimately both become very successful, have you as a child. So, genetically, your DNA is that of an artist, and you sort of live this life where the manifestation of these two brilliant artists starts to have some success, but you also have some struggles during your childhood. So talk about, before you get to 16, some of the struggles that you were having, both with your health and with your education.
Okay. Well, I remember being in first and second grade in New York City. And right after I was bitten by the tick, and having joint pain in my knees and having to bend my legs a lot just to stretch out my knees, because my knees were hurting a lot. They were like kind of squeaky and tight and sore. So I'd keep bending my legs at the knee joint, and they would say, what are you doing with those frog legs? You're making frog legs. And I just kept kicking my heels up to my butt, like all the time. It almost became like a habit, almost like a tick in a way, because it felt good. And then I was having a lot of strep throat, which, strep throat things, and some tummy issues. And then when I was in about third grade or so, I started getting some headaches. And my mother brought me to the pediatrician, said my child was having like pain in her legs, joint pain and things. And they said, oh, it's the growing pains. Okay, it's growing pains. So, and also but my father is dyslexic. My mother is, ADD. And listen, we have classic learning disabilities running in our family. So it's like no surprise that like reading was difficult and I got numbers all mixed up. But my eyesight and my eyes and my vision kept going in and out. And when I would read, which was difficult for me anyway, to comprehend the reading as well was challenging. But then my vision would go in and out. And my memory started to be an issue in fourth grade, in fifth grade, memorizing things for tests and quizzes became extremely overwhelming, and I became very anxious about it. And yeah.
So Ally, you're having very classic Lyme disease symptoms. You
Yep.
have parents who are caring parents. You have parents
Yep.
who have means. They're bringing you to doctors. And there seem to be a lot of explanations, non-Lyme explanations that they're falling on, whether it be learning disabilities or other types of explanation.
Right.
So talk to us about what you are doing, right? Because you're this sort of the manifestation of an artist. What types of things are you doing? What type of acting classes and the kinds of things are you taking at that time in your life?
I was always in theater. I was always acting. I was always in theater groups. I was always in all the plays. And it was just my favorite thing to do. I would do summer camps. I would do theater. I was in theater programs outside of school and in school, always doing the plays. And, memorizing the lines was, definitely a struggle for me. And it was something that I would get nervous about. But what I would do is I would understand the character enough and understand the story enough and connect with that. So that way, in case I did forget my lines, I would be able to improvise appropriately within the story as the character. And I would have to really, listening and paying attention, I would kind of like space out and kind of, get distracted and whatever. And that might just be part of my personality. But I would really have to work a little bit harder on the lines and concentrating. And, and physical moving was sometimes a little bit challenging for me, but I loved it so much that I didn't really care.
So now at a very young age, you began to make some inroads into the acting world and the theater world. And I understand at 16, you did something that was unique. Can you share with us what that was?
Well, okay, this is after the Broadway thing, or?
Well, talk to us about Broadway, and then talk to us about what you had produced.
Okay, so, well, at 16, I produced a feature film called Proud, which is about the first African-American soldiers being ranked in the Navy in World War II. And they were on a Defender escort, and they ended up being deployed to Ireland. And they were recommended for commendation by one of the commanders, and they were denied the commendation due to their race. So, and they were treated very poorly on the shores of the US. However, they were treated very fair and equally in Ireland. So we shot the movie in Buffalo, New York, on one of their Defender escorts in the Naval Yard, which was freezing cold. And we shot some of it in Elmira, New York, my father's hometown, and then shot some of it in Ireland, which was such a cool experience. And I got Sidney Poitier. I spoke to Sidney Poitier on the phone about him being the star of the film, and he was so sweet. He was so, touched. It was so cool to speak with him. The film is now it's in education centers and on Stars, and it was sort of one of these things that fell into my lap and that I ran with. I kind of blindly ran with at 16. I had no idea what I was doing, but I did it. We did it. It was amazing.
So despite suffering from classic Lyme disease symptoms that were not yet diagnosed, you were able to produce a film that still has legs to this day at the age of 16.
I did. Yeah.
So
that's kind of wild. Well, it's a lot of intuition. A lot of it is intuitive. A lot of, what I was doing, I was managing. I was not functioning at my highest level. And again, at 16, so at 16, I started to write the notes on the script. And 16, we started to say, okay, let's do this movie. Then I turned 17. And at around 16, that's when I smoked pot for the first time. And I realized that I was like, oh my God, this is a miracle. The weed, it was like a lifesaver for me, but it was also a detriment. because it made me, sleep through my alarm. I, was eating unhealthy snacks at night, which of course was like probably inflammatory foods. I was forgetful, but I managed. I just kind of faked it till I made it.
Well, but you were also self-medicating, right? I mean, you were
I was
suffering
totally self-medicating, and it was great, but it was not like, there was like a couple of times where I slept through my alarm, and I should have been on set.
So talk to us about Broadway and your relationship with Broadway.
Okay. So when I was around 13 years old, a family friend of ours said, hey, my friend has written a play, a musical play, and I think you would be a wonderful to act in it. So I said, okay, great. So we did a little audition at like her home and her couch. And she said, great, I want you to play the supporting character. I said, great, I'll do it. And it went from off Broadway to off Broadway, eventually to City Center, which I still can't really, is it like on Broadway? Is City Center considered on Broadway?
It is.
Okay, so they're on Broadway. I mean, we had a playbill. I mean, I always want to be specific about my words, and I always paranoid that I'm, I have that fear of being a fraud. What is that? Imposter syndrome? That's what it's called. A lot of people in my generation have this, by the way. I've learned. It's very, very
a lot of people with Lyme disease have it, right?
Yeah, there you go. So that's what that is.
So let's talk about your step onto the MTV set in Rich Girls.
Oh boy.
What was that experience like? How did you become one of the first reality TV stars, and what was that experience like?
All right. So after the film Proud was launched, there was an article in the New Yorker, or the New York Magazine, about me being a producer at 17 years old and about the film. And MTV saw it, and they called me up and they said, hey, we think that it's incredible what you've done. Will you come into our offices, and we just want to have a meeting with you and maybe discuss doing something with you. And I thought, cool. I mean, MTV is cool. Why not? So I said, my high school, gets at my last class is at 3:30. I can be there at 4 o'clock. This is Halloween. I arrive in the offices with like I'm like wearing like this white blazer, a white skirt, and huge feathered angel wings and glitter all over my face. Because I was like a sexy angel with like a corset underneath, whatever. I was like in 11th grade or something. So I arrive in the office by myself. I've never had a manager, an agent, no father, no lawyer, no anybody. This is me. Arrived. And they were like, oh, wow, what a great costume. And by the way, we're fascinated with your film. So I was like really chatty about the movie and really excited about the film, thinking, oh, great, we can get Proud on MTV. Like, this is so cool. We can get this story out there. And they're like, well, we want, maybe we're thinking about, like, maybe, have you ever heard of a VJ? Would you want to be a VJ and host your own show? Which I should have said yes. I was like, oh, no. Like, I don't want to do anything like that. I was probably nervous about remembering lines or something at that point. And I said, I really prefer to be behind the scenes, which makes zero sense since I grew up on the stage. Whatever, I don't know what happened there, a glitch. And they said, oh, cool. Well, maybe you can develop a TV show with us. Do you have any ideas? I mean, I came into this meeting with zero preparation. Zero preparation at all. And all of a sudden I thought, what would be an interest, in the middle of the meeting, what would be an interesting topic to explore for MTV? And I thought, oh, here we go. It's fascinating how different the lives of teenagers are in the private school community of New York City. But there's a lot of judgment around it, but there's a lot of pain and suffering within it. So I thought it would be interesting to explore the inside behind the closed doors of these households and these lives of kids who went to private school in New York City, who grew up very fast, but had a lot of dysfunction in their home. And to compare it to the more normal lives of kids in America. And the kind of compare and contrasting game. And ultimately for people to gain a broader sense of compassion, education, and understanding of the lives of these kids, and how much pressure we were under, and scrutiny, and an unhealthy amount of adulthood at such a young age. And I thought it was fascinating. And they said, "Oh my gosh, this sounds incredible. You go, can you write us a treatment for the movie?" I mean, I had no idea what the word treatment meant. I had no idea. Of course I can. Absolutely I can, because I never say no to an opportunity. And of course I'll figure it out. So I said, "Great, nice to meet you." He said, "Great, we'll be in touch in 2 weeks and you'll come back in for a meeting." And I thought, I left the office, got into my car, because I drove at that point between Connecticut and New York myself. And I flipped up my little Motorola cell phone and called up my friend Jamie, who I knew. She was very good at, she was an amazing writer. She was the valedictorian, and she was the school president, and she was very smart. And I knew she was very capable of doing outlines and things like that. So I called her up and I said, we need to meet immediately. I need your help. So we met and we talked about this, and she thought the idea was brilliant, and we started developing the show together, and she helped me write a treatment. And so we did.
So now, Ally, during your childhood, you were studying acting and you were able to fight through the acting, but it really wasn't negatively impacting your health. At 13, you went through this theatrical experience that ultimately led you onto Broadway, and you were able to manage that, but that wasn't negatively impacting your health.
Well, I was very sick during a lot of that time.
You
actually. I had blackout spells. I think I had to go to the emergency room a couple times. I had a lot of joint pain. I was sick, and They didn't know why, and they didn't know what was going on.
Now, do you believe that for example, let's focus on the Broadway or the stage acting element of your youth. Do you think that was negatively impacting your health?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think that I believe it's very important to exercise the creative part of yourself and to promote as much joy as possible into your mind.
Okay, so part of the development of this now 13-year-old artistic prodigy is to go through this process and give her the creative outlets that she needs. You then get to the age of 16. You have new creative outlets. You're having more enriching experiences. You have a really positive outcome, and now this prodigy has now produced something that probably no other 16-year-old had ever produced. But now we have a very different experience, right? Where you're now on MTV. You're now a part of creating a reality TV show. And this experience doesn't seem like it's enriching. This experience doesn't seem like it's actually helpful.
Correct.
Tell us why you believe that experience was very different than your stage acting experience and then your initial producing experience.
Well, first and foremost, there were chaperones when I was younger and in the theater, and there was structure, there was direction, there were many different people managing the different parts of producing a play, etc. And so there was more organization,
more protection,
there was more protection. And with MTV, we know I was the creator, I was the producer, and I was the star. And at that point, there was no direction, there was no scripts, there was no, outline for your day. I had to come up with the schedule, the characters, the costumes. I had to show up. I had to book the cars. I had to book the places. I mean, it was a lot of
Now,
pressure.
there's nothing wrong with that piece of it, because again, you're a prodigy. This is an outlet. It is enriching, but there is this exploitive element that I think became a part of the MTV experience that you hadn't
Right.
seen before that. So
Right.
talk to us a little bit about how the adults that were a part of this were sort of encouraging maybe some bad behavior, were
Right.
editing the, the
Yeah.
vast amount of material that was being filmed, and how
Mhm.
that impacted you on this life's journey.
Well, I think that, first of all, the title of the show was one of the biggest elements to this conversation, because they had assured me that Jamie and I could come up with the title of the show, and we worked endlessly. I mean, she still, I think, has the journals. We wrote and wrote and wrote so many different treatments and titles for the show. And they scrapped all of them in the middle of filming, let us know that we do not, in fact, have control over the title of the show, and they're going to call it Rich Girls. This is when I wanted to rip up the contract and run the other way. Because, listen, I grew up in a very specific situation, but I did not grow up in a way where you brag about what you have. You're modest, you're humble, you're grateful, not flashy, all of this. And it was completely the opposite. And all of it, the way that they filmed the houses, the cars, the dancing, everything. I mean, it was so vulgar. And so the opposite of the way that I was raised, but I had no control anymore. It was the cat was out of the bag. Everything was out. It was done. There was no containing it anymore. And I had no legal control anymore. And it was devastating. That was devastating.
Let's talk about first the short-term effects of Rich Girls, and then we're going to talk about the long-term in a minute, because I think the title is also going to be significant to the advocacy work that you're doing now. But let's hold that for a second and focus on what's now happening to this young woman who, from the age of 7, had been managing her Lyme disease and the bacteria and the germs in her body pretty well, until she now is on the MTV set. She's lost control of the title of her reality show. She's lost control of the way it's being portrayed. And now she, of course, is now developing relationships with strangers who are watching her and coming to a conclusion about who she is and what her values are based on the way this is now being edited.
Yeah.
We know that Lyme is an opportunistic disease. We know that when we have immune disrupting events, it's more likely that our body's going to crash and we're going to become chronically ill. And it sounds to me that it's this experience, this exploitive experience, that resulted in you suffering an immune disrupting event and becoming chronically ill. Share with me what your perspective is on that.
Well, I've never heard it put that way, and I really appreciate it, because I feel like you've just given me the answer that I've been looking for a long time. And I've never ever heard it put that way. I didn't even know that was it called, an immune disruptive event?
Immune disrupting event. So Dr.
Wow.
Bill Rawls, the author of Unlocking Lyme, talks about immune disrupting events and how
my parents were my parents separated. They decided to separate when I was about 13, 14 years old. And that was huge for our family. That was a very big deal. And I moved into New York City at 15 with my dad, separate from my family. And that was the first disruptive event. And I think that I dove so heavily into work and producing because it was the best distraction for me. It was great for me because I didn't want to deal with the rest of the stuff. But so that was the first disruptive event that I think shook up my system. And then the second one, wow, this is really interesting. This makes a lot of sense. And I never really thought, wow. Yeah. And I was not getting a lot of sleep during the show because I was having to stay up late. and it was just awful. It was just there, and the eating, you couldn't, like, it was just, you grabbed whatever you could, and yeah, there's not a lot of sleeping, not a lot of eating healthy, probably drinking way too much the last year of high school and that summer after graduation, which I don't do well with that. And yeah, it was a lot of disruptive.
So, Ally, I read the book through the eyes of your father because I'm a
Right.
father and I have 4 children. And
Right.
what made me so upset about reading the book and the exploitation that I witnessed through reading your brilliantly written story was I just watched you spinning down and spinning down and spinning down and spinning down.
Mhm.
And of course, now all of these opportunistic bacteria are now, and viruses, and we now know worms are a part of this experience, are now attacking your body, and now you crash.
And probably mold also, by the way.
Let's talk about that as well.
In Connecticut with a very old house. So yeah, I was spiraling with no parental supervision, really. I mean, my parents, bless their hearts, they were doing the best they could. They also had 4 children, multiple homes to manage, businesses. Both of my parents had thriving businesses, and they were going through their own turmoil in their relationship. It was a
But
lot.
Ally, you're also a prodigy. I mean, it's not like you were going to be easy to parent anyway, because your genius brought you to places at 13, at 16, at 17 that most children wouldn't find themselves, and parents don't always have the ability to manage that type of genius, quite frankly. So let's be fair to your parents. You were a very special child that would have been very difficult for any parent under the best of circumstances to enrich. So, they had to let you go. They had to let you go. The problem, unfortunately, is that the MTV experience was unhealthy for someone suffering from Lyme disease. And talk about now how the show is now produced. People are now watching the show. You're becoming very well known. But of course, people are now viewing Ally through the lens of this very carefully edited show. How did that cause you to feel about yourself? And how did that cause you to, unfortunately, spin further down, the tunnel to chronic illness?
My self-esteem started taking a toll because I felt like I was being portrayed as this uneducated, ditzy, flimsy girl. And I think since reading and math, quite frankly, and comprehension in school was a struggle for me, although I was quite intelligent, I was extremely insecure about my abilities in school to begin with. So on top of it, to be portrayed as this sort of like, couldn't remember what this was, couldn't remember who that was saying stupid shit because I was anxious, like my dad invented cargo pants, which was the stupidest thing I've said. And just weird things. And I think that it was sort of like, if I wanted to paint a picture of the worst version of myself that I was so scared of, they did it for me. And I was like, oh my God, like this is, oh my gosh, all of my insecurities are true because it was on television. But it's not who I truly am. So
yeah, no, but let's pause there for a second. These folks are following you around and taking thousands of hours of footage.
I know.
And then what they're doing is they're cobbling together just those pieces that, of course, combined.
Those moments of like being overtired, when you're overtired, or when, off camera, there's something else going off camera that no one else can see that I'm distracted by. It's very, yeah, you're right.
So let's again, think about that for a minute, right? You're a prodigy, but you're being portrayed as a ditz. Mm-hmm. You're a humble kid who has certainly had privilege, but not somebody who wears it on his shoulder. But now her show is entitled Rich Girls.
I know.
You're now interacting with the world, with everybody seeing you that way. And now your Lyme disease takes off.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe it was meant to be. It was meant for me to crash and burn at a young age so I can do greater things in my adulthood.
And we'll get to the transformation, but let's let's again fully explore the rest of this. So now we get to the scene that we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, which is you're out of control, you're crashing, you need help, you can't get there yourself, and your dad and your mom now have to take charge in a very powerful way, and they bring you someplace to now be isolated from the world and diagnosed and treated. And talk to us about what it was like to be in this hospital setting and what the experiences were like that led you on your healing journey.
Well, I was very, very confused as to why I was there. And it was like being in a real nightmare. It was like a real nightmare. I was really scared and lonely and angry. And I felt deeply misunderstood. And I think that's a very difficult thing for a human being to go through, is being deeply misunderstood. So I was deeply misunderstood with the TV show. I was misunderstood by my parents. I was misunderstood by the doctors. And I felt very alone in that point. So, and I had a doctor there who just wanted to totally just drug me and make me just shut up. But I was not going to accept that. So I asked to switch to a different doctor. And that's when I met Dr. Ellen Shander. And I'll never forget Ellen walking into the room and like opening up the curtains. She was all in purple and saying, she saw who I was. She saw my soul. She saw my spirit. She saw my mind. She respected me. She understood. And it was like recognizing an old friend after many years. So yeah.
So Ally, was it at this point that Lyme disease was brought back on the table in a strong manner to finally get tested for the root cause of all your problems?
Not yet. Not yet.
So walk us through how things continued to sort of go downhill up until that point.
Well, by the way, up until that point, I had been to several doctors. And I went to doctors at Harvard, Yale, different doctors in Connecticut and New York. And I was misdiagnosed with different things like multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, depression, anxiety, learning disabilities, all of these things. And, Lyme disease was not brought back on the table at that point because what I was going through is so emotional that the physical stuff didn't even matter at that point. It wasn't until after I left the hospital and continued seeing Ellen Shander as a therapist and psychiatrist that she started noticing things, and I started being more honest with her about my physical ailments and complaints. And she started to say, I think you might have something called Lyme disease. So she was the one that started piecing the dots together. But after I got out of the hospital, because I was so distracted and freaked out about being in the hospital, that was the only issue at hand to deal with.
So when she brought up Lyme disease, was it a surprise to you? Were you thinking, hey, my mom already thought about that, we sort of dismissed that already? What was your reaction when your therapist brought this up to you?
I said, no, I know. I was like, no, we've been down this road. Like they've tested me for Lyme disease, that all of the results have been inconclusive or kind of borderline, or the levels haven't been high enough. So they diagnosed me with MS at one point, which we found it wasn't a real thing for me, fibromyalgia. And that's what I was left with, was fibromyalgia. And she said, no, I think that we have to retest you. I said, but I've been tested for Lyme disease. Why do we ruled that out. It's fibromyalgia. She said, I don't think so. I'm going to send you to another doctor who looks at the blood differently than what the CDC allows.
So, but Ally, prior to this, did any of your doctors explain to you or your parents that the Lyme disease testing is very inaccurate and there could be a potential clinical diagnosis?
No.
Never.
No.
So
never.
your reaction was, hey, I've been tested, I've been negative, and you thought it was a definitive test. So you're like, no way.
Right. It was no way. I mean, one of the doctors that said it might be MS was explaining to us that I did have antibodies but that they were not high enough for him to legally say that it was Lyme disease, legally diagnosed as Lyme disease. Therefore, he's defaulting to possible MS or fibromyalgia.
Was that a subtle way of that doctor trying to give you a nod, do you think, looking back, like, hey, I can't,
Looking back,
yeah.
Yeah.
We've heard that a lot where doctors can't because they're worried for their licenses. Because we've heard,
Right.
I'm sure we've all heard stories of doctors losing their licenses, their credibility, et cetera. So many doctors sort of low key will say, hey, I can't officially tell you have Lyme, but you have antibodies, you're kind of borderline, you may want to look at that. So, do you think that may have been sort of a tip or a hint, a wink, wink to you and your family at the time?
I think so. But I think that we were, not as educated about this disease at that point. And,
but you were far more educated than most others during the 90s, for sure.
It's true, but we were not understanding the wink, wink. We were more hanging on to, oh my God, it might be multiple sclerosis. And my dad's sister had MS. And that was so distracting to us. That was so that just took up all of the space in our brains. So we didn't really think of that.
And after you sort of got away from the scare of MS, it became fibromyalgia, and you figured this was more of just a syndrome that was sort of unknown. And then you kind of leaned back on the psychological, it sounds like, before getting back to this therapist after the mental institution and getting referred to this final doctor.
Yeah.
Now, who was his final doctor? Was it Dr. Phillips that you referred to?
So the doctor that Ellen Shander sent me to is Dr. Stephen Phillips. And he was the one who took a very thorough examination and questionnaire. And the fear of cold was when he said, do you have a fear of being cold? I was like, nobody knows that. Like, I don't, yes, I do. How do you know that? That was kind of a moment of, oh, wow, this guy knows some things. And then he took the blood. And then he came back and called me and it was like, oh my God, how have you been surviving? It was unbelievable to him, I think, at how I had been functioning because of how high my levels were and having babesia on top of it.
So from what I understand, you had one of the worst cases that most doctors have seen.
Well, some of them say that. I don't believe that because I know people who are paralyzed. I don't listen. Yes, maybe it is. Some doctors say that, yes, it is one of the worst cases that they'd seen, but I like to live in a little bit more of a positive la la land where I'm like, no, I'm fine. You've seen worse,
Talk to us about, clearly you went to many, many doctors throughout your childhood up until becoming a young adult. What was that doctor's visit like with Dr. Stephen Phillips compared to your other doctors that you saw prior to that time?
Well, I was alone. I was without a parent. So I went by myself. That was the first unique thing. So I think I felt a little bit more comfortable speaking openly and honestly. And he also was a very sober and compassionate person. So I felt the other doctors, I felt like they thought I was exaggerating or lying. All the other doctors, I felt like, oh, here is this, privileged kid complaining about because she just doesn't want to go to gym class or whatever. That's how I felt in the other doctors' offices. And I felt misunderstood and disrespected a little bit.
So it's interesting.
I wasn't taken seriously, but he took me seriously, being there alone and kind of I felt like I was taking control of my own situation.
So it's interesting is we've heard from a lot of young women that doctors treat them differently and dismiss them because they don't look sick, they're young, and because it could just be young, hormonal stress. It could just be, maybe our last podcast interview was, oh, you could just be pregnant. But I think you have an added layer on top of that you're just a whiny celebrity, it sounds like. So
totally.
you had all the cards stacked against you, and you had to find the right doctor to finally listen to you and believe you in what you were saying.
Yeah. And that's probably why I always felt like a fraud. I was like, well, maybe I am exaggerating. Maybe everyone really just feels like this and I'm just complaining about it, So yes, he respected my words and he took me seriously. And he really listened to everything I was saying. And he was asking me these detailed questions of things that I would never have brought up to a doctor before. Never.
One of the signs of a successful doctor-patient relationship that we've observed from this podcast is when a doctor spends more than a few minutes or 10 minutes with you to really understand you and your background and your history. So from a time perspective, was your visit with Dr. Stephen Phillips a lengthier visit compared to your other doctors?
Very much so. Extremely lengthy. He was very patient. I did not feel rushed. I felt like he was like, if I needed to stay there for an extra hour telling him about stuff, he would have stayed with me to listen. And that's the same for a lot of the good Lyme doctors that I've met. They're not dismissive. They don't rush you out. They're not distracted. They're very focused and attentive. And I think that was a huge difference.
So now talk to us about that moment when you finally have that epiphany and Dr. Phillips says to you, hey, Ally, you have Lyme and a ton of co-infections and you're really sick and we can finally start to working on getting you better. What was that like for you emotionally? And just describe that moment for us.
It was like I'm going to get emotional. It was very, very validating and just like a massive sigh of relief. I was so relieved that I felt like I had an answer and that I wasn't exaggerating, that I wasn't crazy, but that like all of the symptoms and night sweats and headaches and pain that I had been through was validated, and I had an answer and a diagnosis that I could maybe get better. I was like, oh my God, now I can get better. I can heal. Now I can, get this thing behind me and move on with my life, which was the total opposite of what happened.
So before we go there, talk to us about what it was like. Now you're independent, you're at the doctor's office by yourself, and you're going to go home and you're going to share with your family, your mom and your dad, that I have a real diagnosis. I have Lyme and all these co-infections. What was that like for your family to be able to share that moment with them?
I don't remember that as clearly, to be very honest with you. I think I remember it as calling them right up or seeing them and rushing. Guess what? Oh my God. The doctor, they took my blood and it is in fact Lyme disease, N by BZ. And I think that they were massively relieved. I mean, my mom cried. I do remember this now. My mother cried. My dad had tears in his eye. I mean, both of them were like very emotional, very relieved. They were just like, oh, honey, like, thank God. And you poor thing. And we're so sorry. And oh my God, what can we do? What do we do now? Let's, they're so loving. And so, I mean, the poor people were so freaked out about this whole experience in the hospital and everything so I think that they felt the same way as I did in a lot of ways.
Let's put this in perspective time-wise. How long did it take from the time you got released from the psych ward in the hospital that you were in, and now seeking therapy with this amazing counselor that you loved, getting to Dr. Phillips and getting a positive diagnosis? How long did that time period take?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know. I was in the hospital for like a total of 4 months, which is crazy because I didn't want to leave. After I got used to it and I got into a little program and they put me in a different place, like a little house that you live with other girls. I felt safe there. I felt like I was in a routine. I didn't really want to leave. So I kept wanting to extend my stay there. And we were able to do it. So I stayed for 4 months. I probably would have only been there for 2, but anyway, so after I left, I don't know, maybe like 2 months after I left.
So Ally, I personally believe there are many people that have been struggling for years and decades today that are dealing with a mystery illness that likely is Lyme disease and co-infection. So yeah. I also believe that your circumstances are not coincidence, and all of your life circumstances leading up to your diagnosis, as weird as it sounds, was a positive thing because you got a diagnosis, which many people don't have today that are suffering from a tick-borne illness.
I know. I think that if I hadn't hit that bottom and ended up in a hospital, I think I would have just kept managing and kept self-medicating and plowing through my career and using work also as an escape to ignore, it was a great distraction from my mind to not focus on the pain and the discomfort within my physical body. So I think I would have just plowed through, and maybe, but ultimately, I think inevitably I would have always crashed and burned. I think that just is what happens. And I was lucky that I crashed and burned at a young age, quite frankly, because then I could really take the earlier part of my life to start the healing journey and become awakened in a lot of ways, so that I could live in an adulthood with a bit more knowledge.
So talk to us more now about, you finally have this epiphany, you're diagnosed, and now you're with one of the leading Lyme doctors, Dr. Stephen Phillips. What treatment protocol do you start on once you get this diagnosis?
Okay. Oh, yeah. I was on amoxicillin, Plaquenil, Malarone
Yep.
for the Babesia. I think that was it at that point.
So were you strictly on,
there was a whole cocktail. There were like so many medicines, and I remember like going to the pharmacy and picking them up, and like I was so overwhelmed, so confused, because you're mentally functioning. My neurologically, I was not so great. So I was like, oh gosh, how do I even schedule this throughout my day, to take all this medicine, and what do you take with that, and you can't have dairy with that, and So it was a little overwhelming. It took me about a week until I think I started the medication, because I needed to figure out how to organize it.
Ally, were these all oral antibiotics? And
Yes, thank God.
Okay.
Yes.
So you went on a cocktail essentially of this anti-malaria medication, which is really used for Babesia. You went on antibiotics and probably some other supplements and a whole bunch of other things. How long were you on these drugs for?
Oh my God. I think about 9 months almost. And also I didn't know the Malarone causes depression also.
That's a really important tip for everybody listening, that they need to look carefully and explore the side effects of their medications with their doctors. Many people don't experience some of these side effects, but it's important to be aware. So in case you do have a change in your mood or your physical health, that you can correlate it back to these drugs, especially when you're on so many, right? And right. That's not done often enough, I feel, in the Lyme community.
There's also a huge element that we're missing here, which is the number one thing that I tell everybody, no matter what, first when they're starting the Lyme treatments, especially with antibiotics, is learn how to take acidophilus properly. It must be refrigerated in a glass bottle, preferably not in the plastic bottles. Live multi-billion culture, a culture like multi-billion cultured antibiotics, refrigerated in a glass bottle, to be taken without food in between the doses. If you can get that down, then you're going to be pretty much okay-ish. But I was so destroyed after 7 years of being on a variant cocktail of antibiotics and pharmaceuticals that it just destroyed my system so greatly, because I didn't know how to support my body holistically in conjunction with the pharmaceutical protocol.
Before we get on the whole sick merry-go-round that you talk about in your book, can you just describe for our listeners what is this, right? So are you describing a probiotic that you're going to take with your, because you're using very high-level words. I just want to make sure everybody understands this really powerful tip that you just gave to our audience.
So when you're, I call it the Israeli army. When you're bringing an Israeli army of medications and antibiotics into your system, there is going to be some depleted down. There's going to be attacks that you don't want it to attack. And so acidophilus is really the long scientific word for probiotics, the good bacteria. So you're going in with the Israeli army to take out the bad bacteria, when in fact it takes out all the bacteria. So it's killing the woman and children also. So we want to bring in the probiotics, the good bacteria, into your system, so that way your body can function at a normal level. If you go in and without the probiotics and take out all the bacteria, you're going to be stuck with a very, very sick person again at the end.
And this is such an important tip that I personally didn't have that knowledge. And I received IV antibiotics and didn't address any of those things. And I feel it really had a negative impact on my healing journey. So that's a really important tip for everybody listening.
Yeah.
But another follow-up question is, in addition to treating with just Dr. Phillips, I think you had a whole team of doctors, almost 12 doctors in total at this point, right? Yeah,
because I went from Phillips to another doctor to another, because what I would do is I would do the treatment. I would get, by the way, when you start taking these medications, if you're in fact sick with Lyme or by bees or a co-infection, your symptoms flare up quite significantly. And that's something called a Herxheimer. And I did not know. I was like, oh, freaking out. Like, why am I getting more sick? Why am I getting fevers? The night sweats were worse. The joint pain was worse. The fatigue was way worse. And I was like, whoa, I am not getting better. I am getting worse. And they were like, no, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's confirming that you're in fact infected with Lyme disease. And this is your body saying, yes, I do. And thank you for starting to heal. But it really makes you feel like you've been trampled with like 10, 18 wheelers. It's not, it's not a fun experience. So after the Herxheimer, which can last up to 2 months for some people, you start to level out and you start to feel better. And you kept taking the antibiotics and kept feeling better and stronger and stronger. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm better. You wake up one day, you think, gosh, I think I'm better. So I would say, great, I don't need these anymore. I can go back to work now. And I'd say, no more medicine. I'm done. They say, okay, you're good. It seems like the treatment has worked. And then I would come to relapse a few months later. And that's when I'd say, okay, well, maybe I need to see a different doctor. Maybe his treatment will work better. So I went from doctor to doctor in that way. But I did everybody's treatments thoroughly. I really did. And I think that's very important, to not doctor hop and mix them all together, but actually stick to one protocol, see it to the end, and really follow the directions very thoroughly and give it like a real good shot. And then after that, if you want to see somebody else, but I did stick to their things.
So you followed through with these protocols.
Oh,
but
yeah.
From your book, and it's not uncommon, you got diagnosed when you were 19, you started treating around the time you were 20, and you said pretty much for your entire 20s, every summer you were bedbound, because you would have this cycle where you would treat in the fall, I believe, right? And then you would get a little bit better in the winter and the spring, and then you'd kind of go back, run a business, be super aggressive with your lifestyle again, and then get sick every summer, and had that cyclical sort of illness. You called it, I think, the sick merry-go-round for almost 7 years. So at that point, you just had to sort of bounce around from doctor to doctor to doctor every season almost to get better, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's right.
So what were these doctors saying? I mean, on the second and third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth and the seventh time, but you said, hey, look, this is becoming a pattern. Why is this happening? What were they saying to you? Why you were having the cyclical pattern on an annual basis with your flare-ups, and then ultimately your relapses to put you bedbound every summer?
I don't really think they said anything. I don't remember. I don't remember. I think they just said, okay, let's try something different. I think that they also said that because I was so sick for so long untreated. I had Lyme disease and Babesia attacking my body, attacking my mitochondria, attacking my cells, attacking my brain, my heart, my lungs, my stomach, my joints for 12 years straight, completely untreated, that it was no wonder why I was taking a few times. And it was no wonder why this was more complicated than most, because, you can't just expect for one treatment to heal 12 years of damage.
But let's focus on that, Ally, because I feel like you just hit on something really powerful. You were sick for so long, and it created system-wide damage to your body at your cellular level, at the mitochondrial level, and even at your nerve level, probably, which takes years for those things to repair themselves, even after successful treatment for an illness. So do you think that you know, in hindsight, looking back, you did these treatments for, let's say, 6-7 months, then you start to feel better and you jump right back into normal life, that you needed to sort of gradually give your body time to heal and slowly introduce yourself back into normal life, and that would have been a better way to reintroduce a healthy lifestyle and maybe prevented you from having a 7-year sick merry-go-round?
Yeah, I think that, you know, yes, I'm a very ambitious person, and I like to be very productive. So yes, I think that the stress, it definitely flares me up.
And we see this all the time where people just, they want to get better. And we see this just this past week where people are like, I'm getting better. I'm going to go back. I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be this. And I'm going to work 13-hour shifts. And I'm like, whoa.
I'm still like this, by the way. I still struggle with this. I really do. It's such a thing. And I don't know what the solution is. I really just, except for it's not me. It's totally insane.
Well, you know, Ally, you found the solution.
I'm an
we're going to get to that.
Person.
You're living the solution right now, and we're going to get to that. So I can't wait to get to that part of the story. We're almost there.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, you know, this is really an important tip to say, be kind when and we've seen this with so many people where they start to feel better and they jump back into full 24/7 New York, New York City lifestyle, and then you crash, right? You can't do that.
Totally crash. You have to really slow your roll and really treat yourself with kid gloves for a while after, and be very, you know, prudent with your time management and your sleep and your diet, and be very kind and nurturing and nourishing to yourself. But I think that there's this thing of, oh my God, I've missed out on my life because I've been in bed for 5 years. So I want to go out and do everything. I mean, of course we feel like that, but you know, moderation. But who the heck knows how to do moderation when everything's been stripped from you? It's very challenging.
And that includes, as you noted, your stress levels, your sleep, your diet, all those things are contributing factors. And I think once again, here you are now in your late 20s, and your father sees what's going on, and he says, hey, Ally, we got to do something different here. And then he refocuses you from what I'll call Western medicine to a more traditional approach. So talk to us about that pivot from this sick merry-go-round, the 7-year window, to your dad getting involved again and helping you really navigate you to a better path to healing.
Well, at that point was my kind of second lowest point in a way, because I turned around and I said, listen, I'm sick again, but I can't go through this anymore. I cannot like go to a new doctor, get a whole other protocol, get the Herxheimer flare up again. I'm done. I'm either going to live like this for the rest of my life, or just, and again, it wasn't like suicidal. It was just like defeated. I was just like, I don't know, I don't think I can live like this anymore. Is this what my life is going to be like? I'm never going to be able to have kids or a normal life or a family. Like I just, and he was like, wait. Like we haven't done the Chinese medicine or the home. And I just thought, oh, I'm so tired of this. I'm not like an experiment. I did not have any motivation. I really didn't. So that was a really low point of thinking this is going to be my life for my whole life. And what the hell am I going to do?
Now, if it weren't for your dad, did your dad have to sort of strongly encourage you to go seek this Chinese medicine? Because he brought me to the doctor. He found the doctor. He brought me to the doctor. So, no, but as a New Yorker and as a Westerner, we typically, I feel like, are brought up thinking Chinese medicine is sort of this woo-woo medicine, and we need to rely on more, pharmaceutical type treatments. Did you have that same mentality of, no, I tried all this? You did not. Okay.
No, because we knew a lot of, very intelligent people in New York City, intellectuals who were strong believers in Eastern medicine, and we grew up with astrology. My mother studied astrology and always had astrologers around guiding my dad's business, etc. So Eastern medicine was always, and my dad, and we had many people who we trusted who really swore by Eastern cultures. Indian, because he had a lot of Indian partners and Chinese partners, and they all swore by the Indian Ayurvedic medicine methods as well as the Chinese medicine. So we trusted that because they've been around for way longer than Western medicine has been around. So we trusted it. We trusted that a lot. But I just knew that it was more involved.
So your hesitancy wasn't that you didn't believe in it. It was you were burnt out.
No,
You had 7 years of hell
exhausted.
and you were done.
No, I know how many herbs and tinctures and, you know, how involved the homeopathic or alternative natural road is. And it's very involved and it's very complex. And you get an even larger satchel of treatments to come home with. And I knew that, and I knew it would take a longer time because it just does. And I did not feel like any of it at all, but I did it.
So I'm going to now ask you the same question, but in a different way. Now you're going from all these Western doctors and then a different experience with Dr. Phillips to now an Eastern Chinese doctor.
Well, we thought, gosh, I've been through all these Western doctors, you know, their treatments aren't working. I've got the IV for 9 months in my heart. You know, I did the whole thing.
So Ally, before we get into the Chinese medicine, I just want to focus on, many people come to us and say, I've been on oral antibiotics. I'm not having success. I'm considering IV antibiotics. And for some people that works, for some people it doesn't with chronic Lyme. And everybody has different opinions. But for you personally, do you feel it was worthwhile to do the IV Rocephin antibiotics after the oral antibiotics before you eventually pivoted over to Chinese medicine?
Okay, I can't give really a clear answer with that one, but I do know that the IV antibiotics after that treatment was the best, was the healthiest, you know, quote unquote healthy, was the best I'd ever been after any treatment, and it sustained me for the longest. So I was well after the IV treatments for the longest amount of time. I think it really went in and did a lot of work. But I think that I was left with a lot of damage from the many years of antibiotics, from the IV Rocephin, from the 12 years that, you know, I needed ultimately, no matter what, I needed the more alternative methods to be able to fully and wholly heal my system.
I'm going to ask you a very hard question here, but looking back, would you skip the IV antibiotics and went right to Chinese medicine, or would you have done the IV antibiotics and Chinese medicine?
I would have done both at the same time.
That is probably the best answer I think you could have given us, because that seems to be what the studies are showing is the best way to tackle these diseases.
Yep, I would totally combine the two fully from the get-go and add in meditation. And I mean, Cambo.
Let's talk about Cambo. So first, we've had one other guest.
Cambo is a combo.
And you know, we get, you know, it's frog poison, it's this, it's that. We had one other guest lightly talk about it, but offline we've had many people tell us they've had great success with it, but it's sort of this like, it has a really bad reputation out there. So tell us what it is, and have you tried it, and has it helped you?
Yeah. So Cambo it's from a frog. It is the poison from a frog. It's a very ancient method of healing. And it basically, it's a very intelligent medicine, if you will. It really is, it's so intelligent that it goes to places in your body that you didn't even know needed to be healed. And it goes basically inside of every single cell and essentially scrubs it and cleans it out so thoroughly. I mean, listen, the process of the treatment is a little brutal. You know, you have to detox and fast for a little while before there's a whole ceremony where you have I would hope a shaman there which is, I think that's what freaks people out, is the woo-woo side of that, but it just is what it is. And you have to be burned in certain parts of your body, and they press the poison into the open wounds and you vomit profusely. But you kind of go into this strange state of euphoria and heat. You feel your body heating up very much, and you go through this sort of almost euphoric out of it sensation, and then you vomit the bile, essentially. I mean, it's not pleasant. It's very intense, but it's very extremely effective.
And there are many people who are willing to do things like that, even though they may be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
you know, while doing it, if they're going to have a positive benefit health-wise.
Yeah.
So did it help you with your symptom and in healing from Lyme disease, do you feel? Was that a key factor in your healing journey?
I didn't do the Cambo treatments until much later. I didn't do the Cambo treatments until about a couple of years ago, actually, when I was all better as far as I knew from Lyme disease. I was fine. I didn't really need anything. And then there was like, you know, so I was like, oh, I feel like a little like limey, you know, and my husband was like, well, let's see what we're going to do. So, and and we met with a business partner of ours, actually, and he suggested Cambo treatments. And I was like, oh boy, I don't know if I'm brave enough to do that. You know, I was but then after a couple of months of researching it and talking to a few people, I heard it was the most effective thing in the world, and also for other traumas. Mm-hmm. And I have been through other traumatic things in my life that I knew needed healing. And so I thought, well, okay, we'll see if I want to do it. And it was wild. We met with the shaman and his team and spoke to him about everything and made the appointment. And I swear to God, I don't know what came over me or why this happened. I would have crawled on a highway to get to the appointment. It was like my spirit, my soul was so drawn to this experience that I knew I needed to have this, and I would have gone to any lengths to get there. I don't know why. It was like I was like out of control. I was like, I'll do anything and go. So
let's talk about that intuition, or as you said, you were feeling a little limey. You started to learn how to read your body and listen to signals that your body was giving you and respond to them before you got to a point where you were really sick, right? So even when you were, even earlier on in your journey, it sounds like you started to learn how to listen to your body and hear your body. Many people always ask, well, how do you do that? How do you know, is this just anxiety? Is it really is it my illness? Is it just, you know, so if you can give some advice to our listeners, how do you best listen to your body and have that intuition to know that you need to do something based on a sign your body is telling you?
Well, I think that the meditation practice and journaling, really being pretty vigilant about journaling and meditation. If you can have access to a therapist or a counselor, it's very healthy and very helpful for you to learn how to form a relationship with yourself and start being more cognitive and self-aware and honest with yourself about how you're feeling. So I think those three elements are incredibly impactful and very simple. They're not, you know, that complicated. It's very easy. It's, you know, meditation is for free. You can do it anywhere. Somebody said you can meditate on the top of a garbage heap in the middle of a concert. It doesn't matter. You know, you just have to show up and do it.
So Ally, to circle back to the Chinese doctor and when your dad basically forced you to go to see this Eastern doctor, talk to us about what that experience was like and what treatment came out of that doctor's appointment.
Well, he didn't really force me. I mean, he had some experience with this doctor, and I saw the benefits of his treatments with them. So I did surrender to it, and I became willing to go. So we went together with my mom, actually, the three of us. And it was funny. I mean, it was a funny experience because you're not going to it wasn't like a normal doctor's office. I think it was like in his house, in an office in his house. And he looked at my tongue, he looked at my eyes, he looked at my nails, he took my pulse. and there was no medical equipment, and which I thought was kind of cool, actually. I thought it was kind of interesting. And at this point, I thought, well, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll take it. You want me to take, raw garlic pills? I'll do it. Like, whatever, I'll do it. So I know I was sent with a whole barrel of herbs and things and treatments, and my mom agreed to go down to the Caribbean with me to start the protocol. And I was a little overwhelmed by it. I was a little anxious about it because it was so many herbs and so many teas, and drink this tea at this time and this tea and that time, that it was like my full-time job. And I just wasn't looking forward to it flaring me up. And I didn't really want to go through another flare up, which is why if I had to go, that's why I'm so hesitant to do any treatments even now for anything, because I just don't want to deal with the flare ups. But I did it, and we got through it.
And Ally, you're not alone in that, but in addition to all these herbals and these teas and all these supplements, did the Chinese doctor also have you other things pertaining to your stress levels, your sleep, your diet, et cetera, that had a positive impact on your healing journey?
Well, at that point, I did not fully understand the rest of it, or I was not willing to commit to all of that. I think I was 23 or 24 years old at that point. I don't remember. I don't know. I think it was 23, 24 years old. And so I was like, I'll give this a try, but I wasn't super motivated about it. So we did the treatments. I was really sick for a while, started getting better after 6 months, came back, started working again, didn't continue taking the herbs, had another relapse. And that's when I made a very full and conscious decision to take control over my health and my life. And that's when I became completely and utterly willing to go to any lengths. And I had this, any length to really get better. And I really wanted to get fully better at that point.
What did that look like for you? So now you finally were fully committed to this Chinese medicine healing modality.
Well,
what did that look like?
I wasn't committed to it. No, I wasn't committed to it. I did it for 6 months. I just did it. I did it in a more removed way. I just took what they told me to take. And I was just pissed off that this was going to be my existence. And I'm an artist, I was painting at the time. So I was making these cool paintings. I couldn't sleep at all. So I got Ambien, and I would stay awake on the Ambien. It didn't put me to sleep. It did the opposite. It gave me energy, and I would go and I would paint these wild paintings. People use it as a drug, I guess, and not for sleeping. As a fun recreational drug. And I was like, oh, this is great. And it brought the creativity up. I wasn't committed to Chinese. I wasn't committed to the Chinese herbs. I wasn't committed to wasn't really into meditating as much back then. I was just sort of managing and going through the motions, and sick of being sick and just waiting to kind of feel better so I could keep working.
So you were basically pissed off, mad, and were doing what you were told, but you weren't committed to the whole philosophy of whole body healing.
Yeah, I was discouraged. I was a little depressed. I just wanted to be a normal 20-something-year-old and paint and have energy and date guys and, but I was so, I had a couple of relationships. I just broke them off because I was you're not going to want to deal with this. So I'm just going to go to the Caribbean real quick and take a bunch of smelly herbs, and I'm really not so happy about this.
And all of your feelings are totally justified, and anybody in the world would experience those same frustrations you had as a 20-something-year-old, just wanting to be healthy, 23. Happy, and live your life, right?
Yeah, I was 23 years old. Can you imagine?
So, at this point, you took the herbals, you got a little better, you relapsed, you're taking the herbals again. Now you're taking the Ambien. You're not sleeping, which is probably really not good for you, right? What
No,
happens
but
after that?
then I would fall asleep and just sleep and nap all day. I mean, I think I was just depressed, honestly, also at that point. I think I was a little depressed.
So walk us through the next steps. Where does your life journey take you after this? Do you have another relapse? Do you start to adopt more Chinese medicine? What happens from this point forward?
Yeah, I go back to New York. I think I had a couple of art shows. And I just wanted to live my life at that point, you know? I just didn't want to be sick anymore. So I just tried to like live as a normal person, and it did not work out for me. I got sick again. And that was a huge moment in my life where that was a huge moment of, do I want to die and not live my life anymore? Which I wasn't like feeling that. I wasn't like I said, I've never been suicidal. It wasn't like dark like that. It was just like more of a pragmatic thing of, I can't live my life like this anymore. So I either choose to like not live my life because this is just fucking pointless and I can't stand it anymore. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'll figure it out. Or am I going to like pull my boots up and get on with it and actually like really commit to healing myself once and for all and fully? And I have a very strong will to live. And I wanted to do a lot of stuff in the world. So I chose the latter. And I found this incredible German doctor, Dr. Thomas Schultz of Manhattan Advanced Medicine. And I heard from several different people from different sources that this guy was amazing, that this center was incredible. And I was like, okay, this is what it is. This is my next thing. And I think this is going to be like the once and for all thing. And I had prepared myself this time. I called my cousin. I mean, bless her heart, she dropped her life and came and lived with me in New York to take care of me because I knew I needed the support. And I was like really, really committed to doing this because I just did not want to go through any of this again. And I really took it very seriously. I was on a very intense detox diet. I hate needles, but I did homeopathic needle injections. I took the herbs and the drops and everything, and I put them on an altar and meditated with them. I prayed. I did everything. I really like fully committed to this program, and I had never felt better in my life. I mean, I got really sick, and it's like the detox, like I gained a bunch of weight, and everything was crazy. But then I leveled out after 6 or 7 months, started to level out a little bit, and like had never felt better. Never felt better. And of course, again, I had all of these opportunities to start producing people's fashion shows and styling and all of these things. And so I started working again, but I was very vigilant about sleeping and meditating and taking care of myself and diet. So I was able to manage through that. And then my dad said, why don't you start your own clothing line? And I said, yes, absolutely, I can. I'm well again. I can do this. Started doing that. And by the way, this is over the course of 2 years. I was doing well. But then when you're running your own company and in the fashion business, balancing all of wellness is very challenging to do. And of course I was like, I want to change the fashion industry to become more well and holistic and healthy. And we're going to take meditation breaks. And, that can't happen every day. So it was that protocol, though, the German homeopathic treatment and detoxing was probably the most thorough form of treatments I'd ever done, and the most committed I'd ever been. It was the most effective, essentially.
So I'm almost afraid to ask this question, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer from just doing our background research on you, but tell us what happens now. You're 2 years in, you're doing well, you're managing your stress, you're sleeping well, you're fully committed to this protocol, but you're also doing too much, just to be frank about it. You're running a business, you're taking on too much in life.
Mhm.
What happens next?
Start the business. I meet my now husband. I was 25. Can't believe that. I was 25, met my Steve, my husband now, and was falling in love and happy and really at like the top of my game with my business. I was so proud of the shows that I was doing, and it was really going very, very well. And in the spring, it was around March, when I just had way too much on my plate. It was just too many things. And I remember having like 2 laptops opened up, 2 notebooks. I mean, it was like I didn't know what to do first. And I crashed. And my brain, it was like an on switch had been on and sustainably well for 2 years. And then all of a sudden, sitting at my desk, it went off. And that moment was, oh yeah, just awful. Just so scary and so devastating for me. I cried more writing my book about that moment and about having to close my clothing business and having to stop everything. I cried more writing that in my book than anything else. And I still really, I don't know why it upsets me so much. But it really, oh, that was really hard.
Thank you, Ally, for being so open and raw and sharing this with us, because we totally understand, and we can't thank you enough for just being so true and open and honest and sharing your journey in every part of your Lyme journey with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that I've gotten through so many of these times, to be very honest with you, and the way that I was able to get this through this next part of my story was 2 things. One is love, which is what I believe God is, and the love that I felt from my husband, from my partner, and the love that I learned to have for myself. And then the love that grew within me for other people suffering. And that I dedicated the next part of my healing journey to other people who were sick at that point. I dedicated my healing to other people in the future and at that moment who were sick and suffering, because I thought, okay, I'm not going to do this for myself anymore. I'm going to get better for other people to help them. So now I'm going to commit myself to going to any lengths once again and trying everything so that I can share. Because I believe at that point I was like, I have to have some other goal to get well. And it was to share my experience and to help people at that point. And that was that transformative thing that happened. And I thought, okay, now this is my mission. Now this is my goal, and that was the catalyst. That was the motivator. That was the engine that brought me to continuing the healing path, because as you can see, I mean, how disheartening it was to have to do it again. And that everyone's sick and everyone's sick now. Like, you are the people who helped me get through that part of my life. And that's when I said, I want to have a book. I would like to have a talk show one day. I would like to commit myself to getting better so that I can help.
And at this time, Ally, you were sick for almost 20 years of your life and you thought you were better. So it's totally understandable why it would become such an emotional moment when you're 2 years in remission and healthy, and then you have all of a sudden a relapse and you become sick again. So that,
gosh, and I was like doing so well. I was like at the top of, top of the world. And it's just.
So you mentioned this in your book, and you also mentioned it in some other interviews that we watched with you, where you talk about you don't have to be in remission or even halfway there to be able to help other people. You can be in the throes of Lyme and still help other people in the community, which I found so powerful, because many people don't think that they have anything to offer to help other people.
Oh, you have more to offer than any doctor does.
So please talk more about that, because I want to encourage people who are listening to this episode that even if you're in the throes of Lyme and you're at your sickest, you can still help other people. And it's that community and that network that's going to help all of us get through this and ultimately influence change in the Lyme community.
Absolutely. So I mean, I really do believe that the most sustainable way of healing and supporting yourself through the healing process is to connect to others and to actually share your wisdom and your hope with another person. It builds your own strength. It's sort of, it's like building blocks. Like every time I call and say, hey, how are you doing? Do you need any help today? Or how are you feeling today? And, I found this really great, juice from South America that helps. And sharing that, it kind of like, it's like a booster. It really boosts you up.
So I think there's also a psychological, by psychological, I mean a chemical reaction that occurs, right? When you're helping other people, your brain, and to keep it simple, is going to be generating these feel-good chemicals, and you're going to have a positive flood of emotions because you're helping others even when you're sick. Right. And those chemicals and those emotions are going to help you heal quicker than you would if you weren't helping others, or if you were stuck in a negative mindset, right? So I think that's part of this whole sort of helping each other even when you're at your worst, where you can have a positive impact.
It's nature's form of antidepressant, except for the cold showers too. But I really do. I think that it's like a chain effect, and I do believe that if you are aware of this model and use it, you really can help yourself quite greatly and help other people at the same time. It's like a win-win.
So Ally, talk to us more about, while you were doing all this help in the Lyme community and you were helping others in the community, what was your treatment protocol now after this relapse that you had, and you really had this epiphany of, I'm going to help others while getting better? What were you doing to get better at this time?
That's when I turned, Steve and I watched a documentary on Ayurvedic medicine, because when I shut down, when my little switch went off on the off, I was really freaking out. I was really freaked out. And I went to a Reiki healer, and she calmed me down in this middle of a panic attack I was having with Ayurvedic methods, with an Ayurvedic solution. She came into my kitchen and cooked it on the stove. She did ghee with warm milk, cardamom, and cinnamon, and gave it to me to drink, and it just calmed me down. And she said, yeah, Ayurvedic medicine is an incredible thing. So Steve and I watched a documentary, and that night, I remember afterwards, I said, I think that Ayurvedic treatments are going to be the next phase. And I think it's going to be really helpful for me. So I called the doctor in the documentary the next morning, and they called me back, and I made an appointment to go see him. And he said, I really do. I think I can help you. There's some people that come here that I don't think that I'll help, and I kind of just send them on their way. But I think that you have a very complicated case. It is very, very going to be a little difficult, and it's more complex than most, but I think that there's hope. Let's do this. So I said, okay, let's do it. And I was excited. I went to his, he had a Panchakarma, which is a seasonal Indian detox program where you stay at the first 5 to 7 days near the solstice. And you do yoga, meditation, detox diet, treatments, herbs, enemas, massages, Shirodhara with the oil on the third eye. I mean, you do all sorts of things. And it's very, very, very beautiful and emotional and healing. And I learned so much and got so much out of that Panchakarma experience that it really got me over a huge, huge hump, a huge hurdle that I was in the middle of. So yeah, Ayurvedic medicine has gotten me through a lot, even now. And I did my pregnancy and postpartum Ayurvedically as well.
So talk to us more about your husband, Steve. So he met you when you were healthy and you were running your business and you weren't sick, and then you crashed. He didn't know the sick Ally. So what did you do? Because clearly something you did, Ally, you have a lot to be proud of here, because the majority of people that we speak to, probably 99% of them, if not more, who are in relationships when they get sick, those relationships don't last. Your relationship not only lasted, he's now your husband and you have a beautiful child. So tell us what you did and how you communicated with your now husband at the time to keep that relationship strong and going, even when you were at your worst.
God, he's my twin flame, my soulmate. And, I warned him when we first got together. It was like, I've got a big, loud, wild family, and I have this illness. And are you sure you want to get into this? And I remember once I came home after being sick. We had been together at that point for about a year and a few months. And this is right when I had the relapse. I was so embarrassed and I couldn't remember. I remember I rode my bike everywhere. I rode my bike to work. I rode my bike everywhere. And I couldn't remember the code to unlock my bike. And I was just, that really scared me because it was my birthday. And I came home and he met me at home, and I was on the phone with Ellen Shander being like, I'm sick again. And she was like, well, have you been eating the right things? And I was just so angry and so fed up that I threw my cell phone across the room. And I was like, oh boy, that's not good. And I was a little embarrassed that he saw that, right? But that's just what happened. I was so angry. And he just stuck with me. I don't know. I mean, I think just being open and all really grateful and really, I think that I verbally thanked him a lot for being so patient and acknowledged his patience and acknowledged his steadfastness. And I was also as attentive as I could be with his needs, which took work. And I think that, I don't know, I think he loved me enough. And I loved myself enough.
No, I think
there were moments where, it was just like, oh yeah, this is tough.
I feel like with any relationship, but I just want to give you, I don't think you're being fair to yourself to give yourself enough credit that you were so sick, yet you put enough energy and emotion into sustaining that relationship, which is a very difficult thing to do. So, as much as you guys, are probably, you complement each other very well, it must have been very difficult to maintain a romantic relationship while being so sick and having to communicate and talk when you're just so not well. So that's a really, I think, powerful thing for the community to hear, that you can still have love while being chronically sick with Lyme disease, and you can get through it, and you can be healthy, you can have a successful relationship, you can have children, and you can have a normal life like you are now. And I think that's such an inspiration to everybody listening to this podcast episode. So I do want to jump ahead a little bit now. So you mentioned that you're using Ayurvedic medicine and you're having great success. You're starting to claw your way back up out of this major relapse you had with your husband's help and support and your family's help and support. So walk us through what happens from that time period when you're now adopting the Ayurvedic medicine, and between that point and when you then got pregnant with your now daughter.
Right. So I did the Ayurvedic medicine along with a couple of other homeopathic treatments with another doctor. And I did mix both protocols. I did mix the Ayurvedic protocols with the homeopathic protocols, which was very effective. And we moved, after I closed my company, we moved back down to the Caribbean for a little while together. He was able to work remotely from there. And we set up an art studio and painted every day and meditated every day. And I really thought about what I wanted my life to look like. So I started writing down what I wanted my life to look like and how I wanted to function in the world. And I really, really wanted to have a child. And I really wanted to be a mother. I really wanted to be a mother and have a child with Steve and be healthy and live in a place and an environment that was sustainable. And that's when I decided I probably couldn't live in New York anymore, which was an interesting transition, because then the week after I stated out loud, I don't think that I can go back to New York City after this, he got a job offer in LA. And I said, that's where we're going. So we moved cross country and moved to LA, and again, set up an art studio there and painted, and he was doing his work, and he was working with Skrillex, with Sonny at the time, and we went on a tour with Skrillex through Japan, and that's where we conceived Harley.
So, Ally, on that note, so many people reach out all the time about concerns pertaining to having a child when you have or had Lyme disease. I didn't know I was going to get pregnant, by the way. Oh, it wasn't planned. Okay.
No, I did not know.
So once you realized you were pregnant, what fears or lack thereof did you have about passing Lyme disease on to your now daughter, Harley?
Everything. I was so freaked out. By the way, there was a Korean doctor with whom I was planning on getting stem cell therapy from, just because my dad had heard about him, and he was like, listen, just to like completely make sure 1000% that Lyme isn't in your body, just go and see this doctor and like maybe do a treatment, since you're pretty well right now after all the homeopathics. And I really worked very hard on building my system back up from the years of damage from the antibiotics. Now you're healthy now, why don't you do the stem cell treatment? That way you can just really boost yourself. So I had this appointment, and like 2 weeks before the appointment, I found out I was pregnant. And I was like, I was like really nervous. And I was calling all my doctors being like, do you think this is safe? Do you think this is okay? And, and they said, no, I think you're actually pretty healed and like in a good place. You don't have acute Lyme, which is when it can really be passed down to the child. I think you're healed enough. So I went to the Korean doctor. He took blood, because he, again, can look into the blood way better than most American doctors are allowed to. And he came back with the results, and he said, wow, like you have done a lot of work, I can see, and it's really paid off, and you're really okay. You're Lyme free, totally Lyme free. You're healthier than most people. You're going to be fine. And I was like, okay.
So I want to just say that if people are currently sick with Lyme, I think it's your opinion and your living proof that if you can get your Lyme into remission and you can successfully, battle this disease and ultimately dominate it, then you can have a child Lyme free and not have to worry about giving Lyme to your child congenitally.
Correct. And I've still been, I've always, as soon as I had the baby and had our daughter, and even through, like, I'm always, when we do, if we have to do blood work, I'm like, can you just add the Lyme, can you please just add the Lyme disease thing on there so we can just double check that she's okay. Just because I you know, you never know. And she's totally healthy. I mean, I'll tell you, this child is strong as an ox.
And Harley's
Thank
now,
God.
she's 6 years old, had
She's
numerous Lyme tests done and never tested positive. So you're living proof that you can have a child after Lyme and not have to worry about passing it on to your child.
Correct. But listen, this is my unique story. It could be different for somebody else. I don't know.
Well, your story.
When we go to Connecticut, I put her in white leggings and put the socks and spray her down and let her go play. But I'm an educated mother in where she wears all white, long sleeves, long pants, tucks the pants into the socks, spray her down with TikTok naturals on her skin, and then I do off on the outside of the clothes.
So Ally, once you had your daughter Harley and you've been in remission, you've been doing well, did you have any other health challenges, or have you been pretty much symptom-free and living a healthy life since having your daughter?
I've been pretty good, actually. Yeah, I really have been. I've been really, I think there is something that shifted after giving birth.
So before I hand this back over to Rich, and for Rich to conclude this interview, I just want to ask a question because it helps put things in perspective for people listening. Give us an idea of one of your worst symptoms or one of your worst moments because of Lyme disease. And then one of the things that you're doing today that you never thought in a million years you could have done after being sick with Lyme.
Okay, that's interesting. Oh, running. In the beginning of the lockdown, beginning of quarantine of COVID, I started to jog every day. And that's something that my joints and body couldn't really handle that well, or so I thought. And jogging and running has been a big part of my life, which I never thought that would be sort of a thing that I could handle, but I can. I do very well with it, actually.
So Ally, let's talk about the transformational experience that Lyme disease has been for you. You sort of touched on that through a number of different parts of this journey, but one of the things that became clear to me is that you came to a different relationship with yourself through this journey.
Yeah.
And part of the most moving part of the journey, as I've understood it, was that you learned how to heal spiritually, emotionally, and then physically. So talk to us about your spiritual transformation and your emotional transformation and how that played a large role in your physical healing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that once that moment where I really decided that I wanted to take matters into my own hands and wanted to be well, I created this vision of myself as a well person. Like, if I didn't have Lyme disease, what would I want to be like? How would I want to function in the world? And I think that really, setting that goal and that vision really helped me understand who I was and what I wanted. And mine was very basic. It was a very simple thing. It was just really just wanting to live a normal life and being able to go to a grocery store, make a grocery list, and not being overwhelmed by that. I still struggle with that, by the way. But no, it's funny. I turned to meditation and spirituality. And when I say spirituality, I just mean, like, I read a lot of books like the Power of Now, and Ram Dass's teachings really helped me get through a lot of times. And I think having a belief that maybe we're on this planet for other reasons, and there's something out there that is greater than us, and just to kind of not take this whole life experience too seriously, to wear life like a loose garment and just sort of enjoy, relax, and have fun a little bit more, and not be so rigid and uptight with everything. So that helped. And I kind of looked at all these experiences. Okay, this is fascinating. How can I use these experiences to evolve my spirit a little bit. And maybe these are things that I need to learn. There are always lessons within challenges. And I think it's more interesting to approach life in that way. When a challenge is presented, you think, what are the possible lessons that I can take out of this? And what are the possible silver linings that I want to find through this process? And that awareness helped me go through these experiences in a way that wasn't so in the weeds of it. I was able to sort of see the forest over. And I worked with a lot of healers and past life regression coaches. And, I did a lot of that sort of wild, weird, it was fun. It was interesting. It was made the journey a little bit more fun. And it resonated with me. So I went with it. And I learned so many different things through the experiences, and was able to reconnect with a much deeper side of my spirit than I ever had before. And it made the experience more fun and more enjoyable. And I really connected with myself and formed a relationship with myself. And I at one point I worked with this trainer who helped teach me how to care for myself as if I were a 3-year-old. And I did this work. I did like a lot of emotional work around taking care of yourself and forming a relationship with yourself in which you truly love yourself like a child. And it felt so stupid and so idiotic and so silly to like do this work, but it was really, really, really helpful. And I would do things like, okay, sweetie, it's time to take your vitamins, and we're going to feed you now, and you're going to take a nap, and we're going to take a walk in the fresh air. And I did this, and it felt so like silly, but it was so beneficial. And exercises like talking to myself in the mirror and positive affirmations in the mirror were incredibly beneficial. And you have to like kind of get past yourself while doing that. And those exercises are things that I work with a lot of Lyme patients who I'm connected with, and walk them through these exercises and help coach them through them, because these are the things that help you do the real work, besides just the taking of the herbs and the medicine and putting healthy food into your body. It's having the more spiritual, emotional, or psychological element to it. Just makes it more interesting, and I think it's more enriching.
Now, you've talked about detoxing a lot in a lot of the materials you've written.
Yeah.
You've talked about spiritual detoxing, emotional detoxing, and
Right.
physical detoxing. So can
Right.
you talk to us about the importance of detoxing generally, and
Yeah.
speak specifically about allowing yourself to emotionally and spiritually detox
Mhm.
as an important element of your healing journey?
Right. So it's incredibly important, especially when you are physically detoxing, because when you're physically detoxing, you're more sensitive, you're more vulnerable, you're more open, you're detoxing emotionally as well. So it was very important for me to only associate with people who were very healthy and well emotionally and mentally. I also did not watch the news during this time. I did not watch any violent TV shows or movies. And I read books that were nourishing. Again, like I said, I read a lot of Eckhart Tolle, Ram Dass, etc. And that literature kept me on this path and kept me in that vortex of wellness and nourishment. And I created a cocoon. I created a chamber of positivity and healthy, healing, vibrant people who are on that vibrational level that I needed to be in order for my physical cells to start going in the same direction.
Now,
Just-
in your book, you talked about your toolbox.
Yeah.
And you've sort of given us a description, a lot of how you came to developing these tools that you put in your toolbox.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the way you described both building the toolbox that you use to protect yourself emotionally, for example, where you talked about protecting your mind and protecting yourself spiritually and protecting yourself physically. But then you also talked about how you created a different toolbox for you when you were going through your pregnancy to make sure that you would be safe and your daughter would be safe as you're going through the pregnancy. So can you talk to us more about the items that you have in your toolbox and how they may be different for each person going on the journey? And I guess I would like to know, like, how you collected all the tools that you talk about in the book. For example, you talked about having phone numbers of healthy people, of breathing exercises, writing practices, your therapist, food, herbs, meditation, and not lying to yourself. They were all really powerful pieces of the toolbox that you wrote about.
Yeah, there's a lot of, some of the tools are more esoteric tools and some of them are more tangible. Like I have an arsenal of amazing essential oils. I have these little goddess oracle cards that I love pulling and doing in journals, and sage, and a playlist of music that makes me just want to hop around and dance. Phone numbers of healthy people and healers. And I think that having everything in one place, which right now mine are a little scattered. They're like 5 different places, but to have everything in one place and written down so you don't forget, because I think that in moments of crisis, we go into the forgetting mode.
Thank you for listening to the Tick Bootcamp interview with our guest, Ally Hilfiger. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Ally, please visit our Instagram page at Ally Hilfiger. Second, if you enjoyed this episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share it with your friends by using the social media buttons you see at the bottom of the post. Third, Tick Bootcamp has created a Tick Bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been provided to us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at www.tickbootcamp.com to view the blueprint. Please note we would appreciate any input or any improvements you would like to offer. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, we thank your community for your comments on our past podcast episodes. Please take a minute to leave us an honest review on iTunes, on Instagram, or on our website. We make it a point to read every single one of the reviews we get. Thank you for listening.